Michael Johnson was a man who seemed to have everything. He owned companies across America, his name appeared in newspapers almost every week, and his picture had been printed on the covers of business magazines more times than he could remember. People in New York called him the unshakable billionaire, a man whose life was so powerful and stable that no storm could ever break him. But deep inside, Michael was just a father who loved his only daughter more than all the wealth in the world. Emma Johnson was 17 years old, a young girl with bright eyes and a heart full of dreams. She wanted to become a writer one day. Her notebooks were full of short stories, poems, and sketches of the world as she saw it. Her laughter was like sunshine in the cold halls of the mansion where she lived. To Michael, she was not just his daughter, she was his hope, his pride, his reason to keep going when the business world felt heavy. But life has a way of testing even the strongest hearts. It began on a normal Monday morning. Emma had left for school with her backpack, waving at her father before stepping into the car. She was excited about a literature competition she was planning to join. Michael had been on an important business call when she left, but he remembered clearly how she had smiled at him, her face glowing with joy. A few hours later, however, his phone rang again, this time not with good news. The school principal's voice was urgent. "Mr. Johnson, your daughter fainted during class. We have called an ambulance. She is being taken to the hospital right now." Michael's world froze. For a man who had faced ruthless rivals, boardroom battles, and financial storms, nothing had ever shaken him like those words. Without wasting a second, he dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. When he arrived, Emma was already in the emergency room. Doctors moved quickly, checking her pulse, attaching wires, whispering medical terms Michael could not understand. He stood outside the glass window, his heart racing, his hands trembling. Every second felt like an hour. Finally, Dr. Robert Smith, the family's longtime physician and one of the most respected doctors in the city, came out. His face was grave. Michael's heart sank even before the doctor spoke. "Mr. Johnson," Dr. Smith began, gently placing a hand on his shoulder, "we need to talk in private." Inside the doctor's office, silence hung heavy. The walls seemed to close in around Michael as Dr. Smith slowly explained the test results. "Your daughter has a rare blood disorder. It is aggressive and progressing fast. The only way she can survive is through a bone marrow transplant." Michael's lips trembled. "And if she doesn't get the transplant?" The doctor hesitated, his eyes soft with pity. "Without it, Emma may only have 3 months left." The words struck Michael like thunder. He felt as if the floor beneath him had disappeared. He, the man who could buy the tallest buildings, the fastest jets, and the most expensive jewels, stood powerless in front of a truth he could not change. His eyes filled with tears. He covered his face with his hands, trying to hide the storm inside him. For years, he had been called unbreakable, yet here he was, broken in the quiet office of a hospital. Emma, weak but awake, was moved into a private room later that evening. When Michael entered, she looked at him with a brave smile. "Daddy, don't cry. I'll be fine," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but her courage was greater than his. Michael sat by her side, holding her hand tightly. He wanted to promise her the world, promise her a miracle, promise her life, but the truth burned inside him. At home, the mansion was quiet that night. The large rooms, usually filled with laughter or music, seemed heavy with silence. Jennifer, the maid who had worked for the Johnson family for over 10 years, moved quietly through the house. She had watched Emma grow from a little girl into a young woman. She had tied Emma's hair when she was small, helped her with homework, and comforted her during storms when Michael was away on business trips. To Jennifer, Emma was more than her employer's daughter, she was like her own child. When Jennifer overheard the truth from the doctor that day, her heart broke. In her small room at the back of the mansion, she cried silently, whispering prayers into the night. She remembered her own hardships, how she had lost her younger brother years ago because they could not afford treatment. She remembered the helplessness, the pain of watching someone you love slip away. Now, she could not bear the thought of Emma going through the same fate. That night, while the mansion slept, Jennifer knelt by her bed and prayed, "Lord, if my marrow can save her, let it be me. Give me the strength to help her, even if it costs me everything." Meanwhile, in his study, Michael sat alone, staring at the city lights outside the window. His business empire stretched across skyscrapers, but all of it felt worthless now. He thought about the irony of life. He had built companies, signed billion-dollar deals, and yet he couldn't sign away his daughter's illness. Money, power, fame, none of it could buy Emma's health. He pressed his forehead against the glass, tears rolling down his cheeks. "Please, God," he whispered, "don't take her from me." The house seemed to echo with silence, but somewhere in that silence, a new thread of hope was beginning to weave itself. A maid with a heart full of love, a billionaire with tears in his eyes, and a young girl holding on to her dreams, 3 lives connected by fate, waiting for the dawn of a story none of them could yet imagine. And thus began the hardest chapter of Michael's life, a chapter where love would be tested, sacrifices would be made, and the true meaning of family would shine brighter than all the wealth in the world. The days after the diagnosis felt like a blur in the Johnson household. The mansion, once full of laughter, grew heavy with silence. Michael Johnson tried to keep a strong face for his daughter, but inside he was breaking. He spent every waking moment on the phone, contacting hospitals, research centers, and international specialists. His assistants worked around the clock, sending medical reports to clinics in Europe, Asia, and across America. Michael even promised millions to anyone who could help. But despite his power and money, every reply came back the same: no match found. Dr. Robert Smith met Michael several times during those days. "Mr. Johnson," he explained patiently, "the only cure for Emma is a bone marrow transplant. We are searching in the national database, but it takes time. Unfortunately, Emma's case is urgent." "Time?" Michael's voice cracked. "You're telling me my daughter's life depends on time, and you don't have enough of it?" Dr. Smith sighed. He had seen wealthy men try to fight diseases with money before, but illness did not bow to wealth. "We will keep looking. Sometimes a miracle happens." But Michael could not sleep at night. He would sit by Emma's bedside, watching her pale face. She still tried to smile for him, though her body grew weaker every day. Sometimes she would talk about her future, her dream of publishing a book, of traveling the world, but her words only cut deeper into his heart. He wanted to believe in her dreams, but fear kept whispering in his ear, "What if you lose her?" In the mansion, Jennifer watched all of this quietly. She cleaned Emma's room, brought her food, and read her favorite stories aloud when she was too weak to hold the book. Emma often leaned against her, resting her head on Jennifer's shoulder, just as she had done when she was a little child. Jennifer knew Emma's smile was brave but fragile. She saw Michael's hidden tears when he thought no one was looking. And deep inside, she felt a storm rising in her own heart. One evening, after dinner, Michael sat in the living room, staring at a pile of medical files. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled, his face pale from sleepless nights. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a lost father. Jennifer stood at the doorway for a long time, unsure whether to speak. Her hands trembled, but she gathered her courage. She stepped into the room slowly, her voice soft but steady. "Mr. Johnson," Michael looked up, surprised. "Jennifer? What is it? Do you need something?" She shook her head. "No, sir. I need to say something." She paused, gathering strength. "I heard the doctors say Emma needs a donor. Please, test me. Maybe I can help." Michael blinked, stunned. For a moment, he thought he had misheard her. "Jennifer, you don't understand what you're asking. A marrow donation isn't simple. It can be dangerous. You could risk your health." Jennifer's eyes glistened with tears, but her voice did not waver. "I understand, sir. But Emma is like my own child. I've been here since she was little. I saw her first day of school, I heard her laugh, I dried her tears. If my marrow can save her, then I want to give it. Please, sir, let me try." Michael stood frozen. He had expected loyalty in his staff, but this was more than loyalty. This was love. For years, he had treated Jennifer with respect but also with distance, never really seeing the depth of her heart. And now here she was, offering her own body to save his daughter. "Jennifer," his voice broke. "Why would you do this? You don't owe us anything." Jennifer lowered her gaze. "Because I know what it feels like to lose someone. I lost my brother when I was young. We couldn't afford treatment, and I watched him slip away. I don't want Emma to go through what he did. I don't want you to feel the pain my mother felt." Michael felt his throat tighten. The man who had built empires, who had stared down rivals without fear, suddenly found himself unable to speak. He looked at Jennifer's trembling hands, her determined eyes, and he felt something he hadn't felt in years: humility. Finally, he whispered, "All right, Jennifer. We'll test you tomorrow." Her shoulders shook with relief. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she quickly wiped them away. "Thank you, sir." That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He walked through the halls of his mansion, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He looked at the portraits on the walls, pictures of his ancestors, of his late wife, of Emma when she was little. He thought about Jennifer's words: "Love doesn't count the cost." For the first time, Michael realized how much he had overlooked. He had believed his money could solve everything. He had believed power meant control. But here was a woman with no wealth, no influence, willing to give everything she had: her health, her strength, her very marrow for his daughter. Michael went into Emma's room quietly. She was asleep, her face pale but peaceful. He sat beside her, gently brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. His eyes filled with tears. "Don't worry, my little girl," he whispered. "We will find a way." The next morning, the hospital prepared for Jennifer's test. She walked beside Michael, nervous but resolute. Emma, sitting up in bed, looked at her with wide eyes. "Jennifer, are you really doing this for me?" Jennifer smiled and touched her hand. "Yes, sweetheart. You are strong and brave, but even the brave need help sometimes. If I can give you that help, I will." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She hugged Jennifer tightly, whispering, "Thank you. Thank you so much." Michael turned away, hiding his own tears. He did not want them to see his weakness, but his heart was overflowing. For the first time, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt hope. That day, as the doctors prepared the test, Michael whispered a silent prayer. "Please, God, let this be the miracle we need." And as the needle drew blood from Jennifer's arm, a new chapter began, one that would test courage, reveal sacrifice, and show Michael that love could come from the most unexpected places. The morning sun streamed through the large windows of the Johnson mansion, illuminating the room where Emma sat in her hospital bed. Though her body was frail, her spirit remained unbroken. She stared at the wall, where her favorite quotes from books and stories she loved were pinned, drawing comfort from the words she had always believed in. Today, however, her mind was restless, waiting for news that could change everything. Michael Johnson paced the room outside, his suit slightly wrinkled, hair unkempt from sleepless nights. He had barely eaten, barely slept, and every sound in the hospital seemed magnified. The phone in his pocket had rung dozens of times that morning, but none of the calls were important. He was waiting for one call, the call that would tell him whether Jennifer, their family maid, was a match for his daughter. Jennifer herself sat in the testing room nearby, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She tried to focus on her breathing, repeating a quiet prayer in her mind. She had been preparing herself mentally for weeks, but nothing could completely erase the fear of the unknown. What if she wasn't a match? What if she was, but complications arose during the transplant? And yet, despite the fear, she had no regrets. Every heartbeat told her she was doing the right thing. The hospital staff moved with quiet efficiency, running tests, checking records, and monitoring machines. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as Michael waited. Every passing minute felt like an hour. He glanced toward Emma's room, where she tried to distract herself with a book. Her small hands trembled as she held it, but she refused to let the anxiety show. Finally, Dr. Robert Smith entered the room. His face, usually calm and reassuring, now carried a hint of excitement. Michael straightened instantly, his chest tightening with anticipation. "Mr. Johnson," Dr. Smith began, "we've received the results from the lab." Michael's throat went dry. He nodded, unable to speak. His eyes were fixed on the doctor, waiting. Dr. Smith took a deep breath and smiled gently. "Jennifer is a perfect match." For a moment, the words didn't sink in. Michael's mind froze. Then, slowly, he felt a mixture of relief and overwhelming gratitude wash over him. His knees weakened, and he had to sit down. Tears pricked his eyes, but he fought to keep them from falling in front of Jennifer, who was waiting anxiously nearby. In Emma's room, Jennifer knelt by her side. "Emma," she whispered softly, "I have good news. I'm a match. You're going to get better." Emma's eyes widened in disbelief, and then tears rolled down her cheeks. She hugged Jennifer tightly, resting her head on her shoulder. "Thank you," she murmured, voice shaking. "Thank you for saving me." Michael entered the room quietly, his own tears slipping freely now. He stood beside Jennifer, taking her hands into his. "I can't believe this," he said, his voice trembling. "You're giving my daughter life. I don't even know how to thank you." Jennifer shook her head gently. "You don't have to, Mr. Johnson. Seeing Emma smile again is enough for me." Michael felt the weight of emotion pressing down on him. He had spent years building a life of wealth and influence, thinking power was everything. But in this moment, he realized that true power was not money, not titles, not control. It was love, selflessness, and courage. Here was Jennifer, a woman who had no obligation to them, risking her health to save his daughter. The medical team prepared for the transplant, explaining the procedures to both Emma and Jennifer. The hospital became a flurry of activity, but amidst the controlled chaos, a quiet hope settled over the room. The donor and the patient were ready, and now it was only a matter of time before the miracle could happen. That evening, Michael walked down the hospital corridor with Dr. Smith by his side. He tried to compose himself, but his mind kept returning to memories of Emma's laughter, of her soft voice, of the way she would curl up with her notebook to write stories. He had never felt so helpless in his life, yet somehow, he also felt hope born of Jennifer's courage. In the donor room, Jennifer sat on the hospital bed, her arm extended as the nurses prepared the intravenous lines. She squeezed her hands together tightly, focusing on the thought that her marrow could save Emma's life. Despite the fear, she felt a deep sense of purpose. She was not just a maid, not just an employee, she was a part of Emma's life in a way that no one could ever replace. Emma, in her room, held her father's hand. "Daddy," she whispered, "do you think it will work?" Michael looked down at her, his eyes glistening with tears. "I believe in miracles, Emma. And right now, I believe in Jennifer." Hours passed. The procedure was long and delicate. Every movement had to be precise, every step carefully monitored. Nurses and doctors worked tirelessly, while Michael and Emma waited in quiet tension. The minutes dragged by like hours, each second heavy with hope and fear. Finally, Dr. Smith emerged from the operating room, his face calm but bright with a quiet triumph. The transplant was successful. Both Emma and Jennifer are stable. We will continue monitoring, but everything went as planned. The news hit Michael like a wave. He sank into a chair, his body shaking with relief and gratitude. Tears streamed down his face, and he whispered a prayer of thanks under his breath. Jennifer, exhausted but smiling faintly, leaned back in her bed. She had given something of herself, and now Emma had a chance to live. Michael walked to her side, taking her hands once again. "Jennifer," he said, voice thick with emotion, "I can never repay you. You've given Emma and me the most precious gift anyone could give. I don't even have words." Jennifer smiled weakly. "You don't need to, sir. Just promise me one thing, take care of Emma. Let her live her dreams. That is all I ask." Michael's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded. "I promise. With all my heart." Later that night, as Emma rested peacefully, Michael sat beside her bed, holding her hand. The room was quiet, but the weight of emotion was almost overwhelming. He thought about Jennifer's sacrifice, about the love and courage that had saved his daughter's life. He thought about how fleeting life could be, how precious each moment was, and how important it was to recognize the true heroes in one's life. Emma stirred slightly, opening her eyes. "Daddy," she said softly, "I feel stronger. I feel hope." Michael leaned down, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "That hope," he said, his voice breaking, "comes from someone who loves you more than anything in this world." Jennifer, sitting quietly in the corner after being allowed to rest, smiled softly as she watched Michael and Emma. She had done what she could. She had given life when it was most needed. And in doing so, she had not only saved a life but had created a bond that no wealth could ever replace. In the quiet night, the three of them sat together, connected not by money, not by titles, but by something far greater: love, courage, and the selfless gift of hope. The match had worked. A new chapter had begun. And though the road ahead would still be filled with challenges, for the first time in many long weeks, Michael felt a glimmer of peace and gratitude that could never be measured in dollars or jewels. The sun had barely risen when the hospital corridors buzzed with quiet urgency. Today was the day of the bone marrow transplant, the day that would decide Emma's fate. Nurses moved quickly, preparing equipment and checking vital signs, while Michael Johnson paced outside the operating rooms like a caged man. His suit hung loosely on his frame, his tie undone, hair messy from sleepless nights. Normally composed and commanding, he now looked small, human, vulnerable the way he had never been in public. Emma sat in her hospital bed, her eyes wide with both fear and hope. She had grown weaker over the past weeks, but today, a strange energy coursed through her. She understood the gravity of what was about to happen, yet her gaze remained steady, trying to mask the fear she felt deep inside. Jennifer sat beside her, holding her hand. Her own face was pale, her body slightly trembling from nerves, but her eyes were steady and strong. She had committed herself fully to this act, fully aware that her own health could be affected. Yet nothing could make her regret it. She looked at Emma and whispered, "You are going to live, sweetheart. I promise." Michael walked into the room and knelt beside Emma, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "Are you ready, my little girl?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, clutching his hand. "I think so, Daddy. I'm scared, but I trust Jennifer." Michael looked at Jennifer, eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know how I can ever repay you. You are giving my daughter life. Nothing I do can match this." Jennifer smiled gently. "You don't need to repay me." Seeing her smile again is enough. The medical team arrived, and nurses carefully guided Jennifer to the donor room, while Emma was prepared for the transplant in a nearby operating suite. Michael followed closely, holding Emma's hand until the moment the doctors led her away. "I'll be right here, Daddy," she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. Michael felt his heart tighten. He watched the doors close and felt the weight of helplessness descend upon him. For the first time, he truly understood the fragility of life. He had built empires, controlled thousands of people, and faced powerful rivals, but none of that mattered now. What mattered was the life of his daughter, and the sacrifice of a woman who had no obligation to him but loved Emma like her own child. Jennifer sat on the donor bed, her arm extended as nurses prepared the intravenous line. She swallowed hard, keeping her eyes fixed on a small photograph she had tucked into her pocket, a picture of her late brother. Memories of her loss fueled her determination. She was giving this gift because she understood loss better than most, and she would not allow Emma to face the same despair she had endured. The procedure began, and Michael was allowed into the waiting area nearby. He could hear the faint hum of machines, the quiet beeps, and the soft instructions of doctors. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Minutes became hours, and with each passing second, Michael felt every heartbeat of fear and hope mingling together. He thought about Emma's life, the stories she wanted to write, the dreams she had spoken of, the simple joy in her laughter. He thought about how fragile those dreams could be and how one act of courage could protect them. And in that thought, he realized something profound: courage was not measured by wealth, power, or influence. Courage could be quiet, selfless, and personal. Jennifer's courage was saving his daughter's life, and that was more powerful than anything money could buy. Hours passed. Michael walked back and forth in the waiting room, glancing occasionally at the clock on the wall. Nurses and doctors moved silently, communicating in whispers, focused entirely on their work. And then, After what felt like an eternity, Dr. Robert Smith emerged from the operating room, a tired but satisfied smile on his face. "Mr. Johnson," he said, "both Emma and Jennifer are stable. The transplant was successful. We will continue monitoring them, but the procedure went exactly as planned." Michael sank into a chair, the weight of relief crashing down on him. Tears flowed freely down his cheeks, unrestrained. He whispered a prayer of gratitude, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known in weeks. His daughter would live, and it was because of Jennifer's selfless act. In the recovery room, Jennifer sat back, exhausted but smiling faintly. Michael approached her, taking her hands in his. "Jennifer, I can't even find the words," he said, voice choked with emotion. "You've given Emma life. You've given me hope when I had none. I will never forget this." Jennifer shook her head, a soft smile on her lips. "You don't have to thank me, sir. Just promise me that Emma will be happy, that she will live her dreams, and that she will never forget the gift of life she has been given." Michael's chest tightened. "I promise. I swear it." Later, Michael was allowed to see Emma. She was resting, pale but breathing steadily. Jennifer sat nearby, her hand gently on Emma's arm. Michael knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "My little girl," he whispered. "You're going to be okay." Emma weakly opened her eyes and smiled faintly. "I feel better, Daddy. I feel hope." Michael's tears flowed freely. He took Jennifer's hand and held it gently. "You are more than family to us," he said, his voice shaking. "You are part of our hearts, part of our lives. I can't ever repay you, but I want you to know that you are loved, always." Jennifer smiled, exhausted but content. "I don't need repayment," she said softly. "Love is enough for me." That evening, as the sun began to set and the hospital grew quiet, Michael sat beside his daughter's bed, holding her hand, while Jennifer rested nearby. For the first time in many weeks, the atmosphere was filled with calm. The fear that had gripped them all was replaced with hope, gratitude, and an unspoken understanding of the bonds that had grown stronger through the trials of the past days. Michael reflected on the lesson he had learned. Money could not buy life, power could not prevent suffering, and even the greatest empires meant nothing without love. He realized that true strength was in acts of selflessness, in the courage to give when you could keep, in the bravery to risk yourself for another. Jennifer's sacrifice had shown him this truth, and he would carry it with him forever. As Emma drifted into a peaceful sleep, Michael whispered a promise to himself and to her: he would protect her dreams, nurture her life, and honor the love that had saved her. Jennifer, quietly watching, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had given life to someone she loved, and in doing so, had become part of a family that would cherish her forever. In that quiet hospital room, under the soft glow of the evening light, a new chapter began. It was a chapter of gratitude, of renewed hope, and of the unbreakable bonds that form when love meets courage. The world outside could be harsh and unpredictable, but within those walls, life had triumphed through sacrifice, faith, and the simple power of a heart willing to give everything for someone else. The weeks that followed the transplant were filled with cautious optimism. Emma's condition improved gradually, day by day, as her strength returned and her color brightened. Every morning, Michael would arrive at the hospital, coffee in hand, ready to spend hours sitting beside her bed, reading stories, or simply holding her hand. For the first time in many weeks, the mansion seemed far away, and all that mattered was Emma's slow but steady recovery. Jennifer, too, was healing. The hospital staff monitored her carefully, ensuring she regained her energy after the procedure. She moved with a little more effort than before, but there was a quiet light in her eyes that had not been there before, a sense of fulfillment and quiet pride. She had given life to Emma, and that knowledge brought her more joy than anything else in her life could. Michael watched both of them closely. He could not help but feel a deep sense of gratitude every time he looked at Jennifer. She had given something of herself that could never be measured, and through her, Emma had been given a second chance at life. Michael realized something profound: for all the wealth he possessed, it was Jennifer's love and courage that had truly saved his daughter. Money alone could never have accomplished this miracle. One afternoon, as the sun filtered through the hospital windows, Michael entered the room to find Emma sitting up in bed, writing in her notebook. Jennifer was beside her, helping her hold the pages steady. Michael's heart swelled with emotion. "Daddy," Emma said softly, looking up from her notebook, "I think I'm ready to go home soon. I want to sleep in my own bed and see the garden again." Michael smiled, holding back tears. "Soon, my little girl. Very soon." He turned to Jennifer, who had been quietly observing the exchange. "Jennifer," he said, his voice choked with emotion, "I want you to know that you are not just part of this household. You are part of this family. I owe you everything. Your courage, your selflessness, your love, it has changed our lives forever." Jennifer shook her head, her lips trembling into a soft smile. "I didn't do it for thanks, sir. I did it because I love Emma. She is like my own daughter. That's all I ever wanted, to help her live." Michael's chest tightened. For years, he had believed that life was about control, about power, about money. But now he understood the truth: life was about love, sacrifice, and the bonds that form when someone gives freely without expectation. Jennifer's actions had taught him the value of selflessness, the meaning of true family, and the power of love that transcends status, wealth, or position. Days turned into weeks, and Emma grew stronger. She could walk around the hospital room with Jennifer's support, laugh at small jokes, and even tell stories from her notebook. Michael would sit quietly, watching, marveling at the resilience of his daughter and the quiet strength of Jennifer. Each day, he felt a growing bond with her, one that went beyond employer and employee. Jennifer had become a cornerstone of their family, a guardian of their happiness, and someone they could never imagine living without. One afternoon, as the hospital prepared for discharge, Michael gathered both Emma and Jennifer in the room. Emma held her notebook tightly, and Jennifer stood beside her, smiling. "Emma," Michael said softly, "soon you will go home. You will see your room, your garden, and your favorite spots around the mansion. But I want you to remember something important: you have been given a gift. Life is precious, and the love and courage of others is what makes it beautiful." Emma nodded, tears in her eyes. "I understand, Daddy. And I will always remember Jennifer. She saved me." Michael looked at Jennifer, taking her hands gently. "From this day on, you are not just a friend or a helper in our lives. You are family. You have earned that place with every beat of your heart and every act of courage." Jennifer smiled, touched beyond words. "Thank you, sir. That means more to me than anything in the world." The drive back to their mansion was quiet at first. Emma gazed out the window, absorbing the familiar sights of the city she had almost lost. Michael sat beside her, holding her hand, silently thankful that she was alive, that Jennifer had made this miracle possible. Jennifer rode quietly in the back, exhausted but filled with a sense of satisfaction and love. As they entered the mansion, Emma's eyes brightened. She ran to her room, opening the curtains to let the sunlight fill the space she had missed for weeks. Michael watched her, feeling a deep sense of relief. For the first time in weeks, he could breathe fully, knowing that his daughter was safe and that her laughter would once again fill their home. That evening, as dinner was served in the grand dining room, Michael invited Jennifer to sit with them. Emma insisted, placing a plate in front of her, a gesture that spoke volumes of her gratitude. Michael felt a lump in his throat as he realized the depth of connection that had formed among them. Jennifer had been more than a maid, she had been a savior, a protector, and now, a beloved member of their family. "Jennifer," Michael said quietly, "I want you to stay with us, always. Not because you have to, but because you belong here." Jennifer nodded, her eyes shining. "I would love to, sir. Thank you for letting me be a part of this family." Emma leaned over, hugging Jennifer tightly. "I don't know what I would have done without you. You are my hero." Michael watched the exchange, tears flowing freely. He realized that love and sacrifice could create bonds stronger than blood, stronger than wealth, stronger than anything he had ever known. The family that once seemed complete with just him and Emma had grown in ways he had never expected, shaped by courage, compassion, and the quiet power of giving. Over the following weeks, life slowly returned to normal. Emma returned to school, with Jennifer helping her adjust to the new routines. Michael continued his work, but he no longer felt the emptiness that had haunted him during Emma's illness. He had learned something invaluable: money could never replace love, and true strength was measured by the heart. Evenings in the mansion became filled with laughter once again. Emma would read aloud from her notebook, sharing stories she had written, while Jennifer and Michael listened. The bond between the three had grown unbreakable, forged in the fires of hardship and strengthened by the quiet acts of bravery that had saved a young life. One night, as Michael watched Emma and Jennifer laughing over a story, he whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. He had spent his life chasing success, wealth, and recognition, but now he understood the real treasures in life: love, family, and the courage to give selflessly for the happiness of another. Jennifer, sitting beside him, smiled softly. "You see, sir," she said quietly, "it's the heart that matters, not wealth or power." Michael nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "I understand now, Jennifer. I finally understand." In the quiet of that evening, the mansion felt alive in a way it had not for a long time. A young girl, once fragile and facing a life-threatening illness, had been given a second chance. A maid, with no obligation but immense courage, had saved her. And a father, once blind to the power of love beyond money, had finally learned the true meaning of family. They were no longer just a father and daughter, nor an employee and employer. They were a new family connected not by blood or wealth, but by the strongest bonds of all: love, sacrifice, and the selfless courage that had brought them together. As Emma slept peacefully that night, Jennifer and Michael sat quietly beside her, sharing a moment of calm and reflection. Outside, the city lights shimmered, but inside, in that quiet mansion, a family had been truly born. One built on trust, bravery, and a love so pure that it could overcome even the darkest moments. And for Michael Johnson, the billionaire who had once thought money could solve everything, the greatest lesson of all had finally become clear: the richest life was not measured by wealth, but by the love one gives and receives.